Hello, my name is Kent Philpott, and I want to begin a little series, maybe 2 or 3 videos on the subject, the Bible, is it trustworthy? I know that the Bible is a confusing document to a lot of people, and we hear a lot of people saying today, well, the Bible is irrelevant, it can't be trusted because people wrote it. And anything that people do, well, how can you really say that this was something that is revealed by God, which is the biblical Christian position, that Christians believe that the Bible has been revealed by God Himself. And so that's why we look to it as something of importance to us. So some people say, well, it's got to be written by people. People are flawed, therefore it can't be trusted. And we use the concept of, from the Bible, the Scripture says it is God-breathed. We use the English word inspired to talk about that. And so that's the Christian position, that it is God-breathed or inspired. Then people will say, well, there are mistakes in it, that there are things that are contradictions. It's interesting, the nature of the Bible, you can actually say that and be correct to some degree. Now, wouldn't it be very strange, for example, if the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all agreed exactly with each other and had no changes or differences at all? It would give rise to the speculation that, well, there was a council in the 4th century convened by Constantine, and they put together this document that was seamless and without any error. Well, that is not the case, and I'm going to be talking about that later on. But one of the things that has to be mentioned in this regard is that the Bible is a product of the Eastern mindset, or the Hebrew or the Jewish mindset, as opposed to what we are very much aware of, the Western mindset. These are philosophical kinds of constructs. And the Western mindset gives rise to science, mathematics often, and everything has to be perfectly in order. It is the way we deal with things. But the Western mindset is different from the Eastern mindset. The Bible comes from that genre, both the Old and New Testament. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, for example, will take the same story, the same event. Let's say it is a parable of Jesus, or it's a story of a healing or something. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they will all differ a little bit from each other. And people say, well, those are contradictions, but not from the Eastern mindset. All the Gospels are their own stories. And the fact that they link up so very perfectly in detail and in doctrine is the key thing. The Western mindset is startled by the differences, and they say there are contradictions or mistakes. There are thousands of manuscripts of the New Testament, and some still coming to light. And the study of it now being computerized, it's easy to analyze these. I have Greek New Testaments with what are called critical apparatus below it, and show all of these where the manuscripts will differ from each other. And what scholars do, they will go back to the oldest and best manuscripts, and it's a really advanced science, really incredible, and they can determine probably about 98% of the time what was likely the original text by the authors of the different biblical books. And then when we have the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, big deal, 1948, and they're still being analyzed and so on. Well, prior to that, the earliest manuscripts we had of the Hebrew Old Testament actually were only about 1,000 years old, a little bit more than 1,000 years old now. But when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, that moved that back more than 1,000 years, back before the times of the New Testament, we find the matchup of those documents, that they read the same, that they were carefully recorded. So there is a lot more integrity to the biblical text than you might imagine. Another thing people will say, well, Constantine is the one who put this all together. He called together a council in the early part of the 4th century, around 325, and dictated that this would be done, and so on. Well, that is a myth. There's nothing to that. Dan Brown contributed to that, I suppose, but there's really nothing to that at all. The history of the formation of the New Testament, I'm going to get to probably in a couple of videos from here, but the story is actually different. It's amazing how many myths circulate about the formation of the Bible, which are completely mythical, made up, and no shred of truth, but are very easily and quickly believed by people. And then there's the lost books of the Bible. People will say, well, you know, there are books that are no longer in the Bible. What happened to them? They got tossed out. Gospel of Thomas, and so on. Well, very early on in the formation of Christianity, even before the end of the 1st century, and clearly by the middle of the 2nd century, the books of the New Testament were well known, used in churches, and were quoted from and written about and commented on, and so on. The final formalization of what we call the canon, the numbers of books, took a while, but there was no necessity of doing it. People knew the books that were valuable, those that were traced to the apostles or the disciples of apostles, and those became the authoritative books. And the others were simply excluded because they were written by Gnostics, for instance. People who were competitors to Christianity and had their own spin and wrote their own books, like the Gospel of Thomas, which is often cited as, well, one of those books that the Christians got rid of. Well, that's not historically accurate at all. And if you would simply read some of those, you'd understand why that's so. So, this is a part of what I'm going to be discussing as we go through. And I just want to say this is one Christian's view. Christianity is such a wide, broad thing. You know, there's a continuum between, let me get my hands up here, all the way over here, you know, you got the far right, you got the far left, and you got everybody in between. I'm over toward the right side of the middle, if you'd see a kind of a bell curve sort of thing. But these are my views. I don't speak for all of Christianity and everybody who is a preacher or teacher or a Christian. But these are my views. There are many views, and this is my approach to it. So this is video number 1 in my little series on the Bible. Is it trustworthy?